Oh, we're live. Are we live?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Positive.
Oh my goodness, I can hear us on the internet. Welcome everybody to Kicking It with Matthew. With that guy, Pastor Matthew. I'm Andy. Good to see you.
Hey.
We're live on the internet as well. Diane's here, Donna's here, Sandy's here. We've got 13 people.
You do your thing. I'm just going to check my email.
All right. While he checks his email, I just want to say a big hearty good morning. Welcome to Kicking It with Matthew. We usually
You said good morning.
I know. It's morning somewhere, right?
Now remember, when we do stuff, you're still supposed to say today.
Today, yeah, that's true. But it is always morning. Pat is there. Chris is there as well. Good morning to everybody as well. Shannon is there. Look at all the people jumping.
Okay.
Actually, if you want to see something real cool, look at this. See, look at that. And now I put all of the chat things up.
Okay.
So this is going to go, theoretically it should go up here, but it's not doing it right now. But I can also say, hey, from Pat McClory, who says, we are live right now. Yes, you're
Great.
live with a hearty thing. It's great, right? The internet's a wonderful place.
It's a beautiful thing.
Welcome to the internet, everybody. Hey, on Kicking It with Matthew, what we typically do here is it's a little bit of a get to know you, but also kind of a behind the scenes, what was left on the cutting room floor. You'll notice, first and foremost, I guess the big question that I have two main questions I wanted to get to. The first one is the most important one. Why do you hate hockey so much? No, I don't want to start there. Actually, I don't want to start there. I want to start with, first and foremost, what is Pastor Matthew Hartsfield's favorite sport? Don't say hockey. Don't say hockey because you're just trolling me at that point.
I actually grew up playing two sports.
Yes.
Many years in Little League,
Okay.
as well as I was a basketball player in Sarasota. And in fact, I was the third leading scorer in Sarasota County in 9th grade.
Wow.
That's my claim to fame.
Who had the last name of Hartsfield and all that? That's a weird stat to keep.
I was the third leading scorer in Sarasota County.
Are you still on the books as the third leading scorer in Sarasota County? Like,
Probably not.
Okay. All
I
right.
don't even think they kept those records for 9th grade Sarasota basketball teams. So,
Okay, fair enough. I think going forward, however, if anybody on the internet, okay, that's my camera. If anybody out there can find those records, or if there's any newspaper clippings or anything like that, send them on our way.
I don't even know what year that would be. In the late 70s, I guess.
You're old enough to have walked in with Jesus, so how was he at basketball? Was he pretty good?
I don't know. You can pray to him about it on the unemployment line.
Donna says golf is her favorite sport. So Donna, that's
Okay.
great. What in terms of favorite teams and all that? Where are we going? Where are we headed there? College, pro? How do you shake out?
Well,
there?
see, I spent my freshman year at University of Miami.
Sure. Sorry.
Played in the marching band, went to all the games and such. When I transferred and I went to Nova Southeastern, from which I got my bachelor's, Nova didn't have a football team. So I kind of had to go back to U of M to root for a team. Then when I went to grad school at Emory doesn't have a football team.
Right.
So I had to go all the way back again to University of Miami. So that's kind of by heritage, but I really haven't followed the team all that closely in years. And then my youngest daughter, Jill, went to Florida State. So I went to games every year with her while she was there. And I followed them more closely because my oldest daughter went to Florida Southern College.
Okay.
Again, no football team.
Right. All of those places
So
have basketball teams.
They all
however.
have basketball teams. And of course, Florida Southern has a great basketball
Yes, they
team
do.
for its division, great baseball team for its division.
do.
So we'd go to, a few of those, but
It's not the same.
it's not the same.
What about pro teams? Do you follow any pro teams?
Well, since
Don't say
the
Lightning.
majority of my adult life has been in Tampa.
Okay.
Childhood as well, because my dad was pastor at First Methodist Tampa.
Right.
And so when I was a kid here, and then moved back here in 1993, to the church here, so that's 28 years, and then all those years as a kid. And so, I mean, obviously when I grew up in South Florida, in Pompano Beach,
Sure.
as well as in going to Miami, we would go to Dolphins games.
Yep.
But I really can't say I'm a Dolphins fan.
Most people can't.
No, I mean,
It's okay.
I'm a Bucks fan because this is my town. This is Tampa Bay.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Everybody in the chat right now, do me a favor and throw your favorite pro and college team in there.
Well, I saw Tom Brady in the chat. So
yes, Thomas Brady.
Hey, Tom.
Yeah, he's in here. He's a big Bay Hope fan.
All
I don't know
right.
if you knew that.
I wish he tithed to Bay Hope.
Me too.
That'd be
My
great.
goodness. We'd be opening new campuses left and right, wouldn't we?
That's right.
Goodness, let's talk about 3M. No, let's talk about that hockey stick you brought in here and why. I guess where I was leading with all of these things was hockey preseason has started back up.
This is to beat you over the head.
It's great.
Okay.
Do you want to explain the origin of this stick and what it actually is in the office?
No.
Great. Thanks for joining us on Kicking It with Matthew. If you were never part of kind of this programming a couple of months ago when the Tampa Bay Lightning were absolutely tearing up the Stanley Cup playoffs, Pastor Matthew had a shocking revelation that we talked about from our production meeting, wherein he told us that he hated hockey. So everybody on the Tanya likes the Chiefs, so that's good. Donna likes the Gators. That's
Wait, Tanya, delete her.
okay. I'm actually just going to put her up on the screen right there. Look at that. Tanya says she's a Chiefs fan. Congratulations to her. Yeah, the shocking revelation was that Pastor Matthew hates hockey. So everybody, I want you to pillory him on the internet right now. Would you like to tell me
You
why?
still haven't gotten over that.
I
have
will
you?
never get over it. You insulted not only me but my family.
I was just kind of
Don't listen to him.
kind of mean because
Yes, very mean
was sitting in a production meeting. Somehow the Lightning, came up in discussion,
because they were winning.
and I knew how much of a rabid fan Melissa was and is. Melissa Miner was leading the production meeting, and of course I knew you and Mike, huge Lightning fans as well, and so I thought I'd poke the bear. And so I said something along the lines of, hockey's just kind of rigged. It's just kind of like fake, like wrestling. Well, oh man, she took the bait. And she really took the bait. What?
And the meeting stopped.
And the meeting just stopped at that point. There was no further ministry production going on. So then Andy and Mike start chiming in, in fact, you said, hockey's the fastest sport there is. It's so exciting. I said, well, hockey's boring. I kept on laying it on. And so Melissa says, well, do you like golf? Yes, that's exciting. Her head exploded at that point. Now, Whitney, sitting over on the couch, she knew what was going on here. So she chimes in and says, I think girls' college softball is the most exciting thing.
Oh, yes. That was an affront to all of our senses.
Just blew
at that
up
point.
everybody at that point as well. Which, by the way, it is pretty exciting.
It's not, it's very fast. I will admit
I could never hit any of those pitches.
No, goodness no.
But, and so the game was on. And it just went from that point because, the reality is I have great respect for hockey.
Okay, back in
for
the truck
hockey
up
players.
Now, huh? Beep, beep.
No, you guys, hook, line, and sinker. I just simply, in fact, that evening it was a collide or something week, or something. I forget when that was.
It was a riot week, I think.
Well, yeah, whatever that was.
Yeah.
I grabbed Mike and had him do a recording with me where Mike was saying, "You've won me over. You're right.
It was riot. Yep.
Hockey is a terrible, boring sport." And you guys...
I disowned him from the family at that point.
You disowned your brother at that point.
It's not the first time. He keeps getting back in.
But, here's the only thing about hockey, other than the fact that I've never been a huge hockey fan, because when you were growing up as a kid in my generation in Florida, hockey was a foreign concept.
Sure.
Soccer was a foreign concept.
Sure.
It was just on nobody's radar screen. And so it wasn't until I moved as an adult to Tampa that even then they didn't have a hockey team, I don't think.
Not
93,
95 was
So,
the first one.
it came to hockey later in life. I've been to a Lightning game, but
Only one?
only one game. And
Rabid fan.
but the thing is, and this is what I was saying to Mike and some of you, is that I think hockey is too good of a physical sport to be co-opted so much by the fight culture. which comes across as so disingenuous.
Yes, I will go
In
down
football,
this bridge with
not
you.
only would they be, taken out, they'd be ejected,
Yep.
they'd be
For
fined.
the next game as well.
Baseball, you rush the mound,
You're gone.
you're gone.
Yep.
Hockey, it's like refs gather around. Come on, let's watch this fight, and then
Well, that's not technically what happens.
it is
It's-
what happens.
It's not. It's not, and they've gone.
You
to
ever
great
watched a
lengths-
hockey game?
They've gone to great lengths to eradicate fighting from the game in the past 10 years.
I just think it's a fascinating enough sport with enough athletic prowess in it. Why would you shortchange it by letting it be taken over by fights?
See, you don't let it. That's the thing is everybody says, "Oh, it's just UFC on skates." Like, no. They still get 5 and 10 minute penalties for fighting. It's not just like, "Hey guys, why don't you, Jimmy, and you, Tommy, come out here and let's fight and let's watch this like blood sport." No, they still have to go penalties. But if there's enough anger and aggression as a referee, and I was a referee, as a referee, I'm not going to step in the middle of those guys as they're swinging. I'm going to let them punch themselves out, and then I'm going to separate them.
Every other sport, you step in and separate them.
Every other sport, they don't
Every other
actually
sport.
punch, though.
Every
Football,
other
those guys
sport.
have helmets on. And then my favorite is when they take up close. Anyway, we're not
Every
a sports
other
show.
sport.
This is not
see,
a sports show.
See, I'm
Let's-
poking the bear.
Let's get to Bible stuff here. So, if you joined us yesterday,
We saved the sports stuff for Austin's
that's figuring
podcast.
it out with Austin and Spencer.
Figuring it
Yeah,
out.
there we go. Not a sports podcast. In a couple of minutes we have left here, because I took up so much time with hockey. Yesterday was a great day. Not only,
I think we should get in a fight.
I'm gonna you're gonna cross-check me. Is that what's gonna happen?
Yeah.
We took some time, obviously, yesterday to talk about the Chosen experience, which was great. I met our child, starts with an N. I still can't pronounce it. We will figure it out. He's a great little kid. He loves soccer, which is totally going to fit in with my family. I'm glad to sponsor him. However, before that, we actually had a message that, and I don't know if you even know this. But
He
we had
wouldn't
a
call
number,
it soccer.
Football.
Yeah.
Football. We had a message that a number of people from both Facebook and YouTube and our Bay Hope TV platform said, "How do I share this with other people?" Because it was a message of sheer hope, and it was a message kind of that was, and I'm not bigging you up here, but it was one of those ones that people need to hear. So thanks for doing that. What, in terms of, the kind of the splash title was talking about inner purity. Where did you what was kind of some of the stuff that was left on the cutting room floor with inner purity? Because we talked a lot about hope, we talked a lot about rules, we talked a lot about that type of stuff, and never really touched on the purity aspect. So I'm just curious,
You didn't listen close enough,
I
did you?
listened, of course I listened. I gotta make sure my people know what's going on here. What was left on the cutting room floor from yesterday?
Nothing. I gave it all. I left it
110%.
on the field.
110%, yeah.
Well, inner purity is what the goal of holiness
Sure.
is about.
Sure.
Because purity connects to purity. So that creates the best relational connection with God.
Right.
Scripture says, "Clean hands, pure heart."
Can't lose.
And they shall see God. What that means is, the more we're experiencing a purity of life, and that doesn't mean just this kind of legalistic, hyper neurotic perfectionism.
Right.
Purity of life means that our goal is to, in Wesleyan terms, to be perfected in love. To let a loving holiness pervade every single aspect of our lives. And out of that purity, we can address relationships, we can address the hard issues, we can address the hard, dark parts of life. If we're coming from a pure place,
Sure.
rather than being driven by fear or anxiety or what the Bible calls about all this subject, condemnation. Because when I quoted 1 John chapter 4, that the only way we can love is because we are first loved. The little children's Bible school song, "We love because God first loved us," okay? So the only way that occurs is by the realization that we are radically loved by God.
Right.
And it's out of that love that inner purity can flow. That purity that comes out of the reality that I'm loved. I'm not trying to earn, buy, or achieve love. That creates the striving and the stress in life. And in that same passage in 1 John chapter 4, it says, perfect love casts out all fear. So the bottom line of what keeps people from actually experiencing the depth of love, purity, and relationship with God is fear.
Interesting.
I preached a message on this one time, and I'll do it again because it's even more foundational than Sunday's message, about, are you living in a soil of condemnation, or are your roots planted in a soil of grace? And it's out of the soil of condemnation that a trunk of fear rises up, and it's out of the soil of grace that a trunk of faith rises up, which produces love, joy, peace, patience, all the fruits of the Holy Spirit.
Yep.
Whereas the trunk of fear produces all of the opposites, hate and chaos,
Slander,
and anger,
envy. Yep.
slander, envy, all of that. And so the bottom line of all of this is, am I experiencing the gracious love of God, or am I still living with a sense of condemnation, shame, guilt, hiding from God? But if I'm living in grace, I can then begin to express the inner purity. Because pureness just means that I'm clutter-free.
Yeah.
Pure means free.
Yep.
That it's free of additives and dyes, as we say, in laundry detergents. But I'm living a free, uncluttered life. That's inner purity. And it's out of a free, uncluttered life that I can give myself to others.
Okay. So in that realm, and I'm looking at the time, we got a couple of minutes left here. The idea that, okay, so you talk about purity, and that's kind of the clearing away. I want to go back to the illustration you used, planting in the soil of condemnation. How can someone that is planted in the soil of condemnation, and really the soil of fear right now, how do they take steps to get to the soil of purity, righteousness, whatever we're going to call it, the soil of grace? How do they get from one point to another?
Simply saying yes to Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. And that's not a simplistic answer, it's just a simple answer. And then, once you've said yes and you've been transplanted, it's actually beginning to live into that, enjoy that, grow out of that. As Paul would share in Colossians, let your roots grow down deep into the soil of God's love. And so Scripture's filled with these kind of illustrations about, where the roots lead to fruits, and all of that.
Yep. Interesting. I was just thinking in my head, Psalm 1. There's a reason it's smack dab right at the middle, and David kicks off the Psalm. David didn't kick off the Psalms, but there's a reason it's kicked off with planting by that stream that is going to continually fulfill.
Right.
In kind of our world right now, and you can ballpark this if you want, but what percentage of our churches are filled with fear-based people?
Like churches in America, the church with a capital C?
Churches in America. Because I think it's totally different. I think there's, at least from my neutral third-party perspective, I look at churches, especially in Africa, East Asia, I think Korea especially, they're exploding with the grace message. And so I look at that and I go, it feels like there's less of a showy principle of faith and more of a grounded principle of faith. And then I look at Western church and I go, I don't know, I get an icky feeling sometimes,
Okay.
So from your perspective, what do you see?
Well, to begin with, I appreciate some observations about the developing world as opposed to sort of Western church world. The dichotomy is not quite that stark.
No.
Human nature is human nature across the board.
Yes.
But principle is still in place there. Yeah.
He just basically told me, by the way, I was completely wrong. But you saw the way he did it. He made me feel good about myself, but told me I was wrong. Continue.
So
I like that. That's good. It's a good management technique.
I don't know as if I would venture a percentage as opposed to saying that it's really about the orientation of where churches are, what what the culture is leaning toward. I think that some cultures are leaning into fear, leaning into a lot of expressions that arise out of being driven by fear. And that's what a lot of what's been known as Christian nationalism is about, which obviously was anathema to Jesus.
Yes.
Because even Jewish nationalism, Zionism, was anathema, to Jesus. He was very clear about that. As opposed to the churches that, yes, still having some fear, we're still fault-filled, broken, sin-filled human beings. We're still experiencing that perfect love, casting out all that fear, but we're still on this side of heaven, by the way.
Yep.
I think there are those that are more leaning into the grace and leaning into what it means to experience the actual gospel. Even Paul's first church, the original churches that were planted, got off course really quickly into being fear-based, which is why he had to write back letters to every single one of them saying, time out, guys.
Yeah, didn't even think of that.
Especially the hot mess that was the church in Corinth. So if they were getting it wrong, even one generation removed from Jesus, we're 2,000 years later, so of course we're going to get off track sometimes. It is what it is. And so it's a matter of continually changing that orientation back, changing the way we're leaning into Jesus and moving closer to Jesus, rather than letting fear stop that and leaning out based on what we can control, what we can dictate, and what we can manage. Because a lot of what passes for church and the Christian life is sin management rather than living in the gospel.
Yeah.
See, Paul got in trouble. They beat Paul up because he preached about grace and the gospel. They only wanted him to preach about law and in control. And they seriously, inside the church, like, no, you can't say this grace stuff. It's just going to lead people to sin more. You got to preach law, law, law. And Paul was like, ain't doing it. So
Okay, I like that. Yeah, and that's a great perspective. I think we're gonna wrap up shop here in just a second. As we typically do on all of our online broadcasts, including our services on Sundays and all throughout our on-demand offerings, I want to leave you with a question. I kind of want to leave you with a little bit of a pondering thought as well, and that's, you hear Pastor Matthew talking about continually reorienting, continually facing Jesus and stepping out of that fear. And I guess my question for all of you, and I'd love to know the answer in the comments, is what's one small thing that you're fearing right now that you can take a step away from? What is one small thing? We don't have to, not the big things. We don't need to talk about the big things on the internet right now publicly. I'd love to talk about those privately. But in your own lives today, is it fear of snakes? Is it fear of guys walking around with hockey sticks that are going to beat you? Stuff like that. Because I'll
give you something to fear.
I definitely fear that. But I would love to know, and I would love to be able to converse with you and pray for you about that, because that's what we do here. Thank you for joining us here today on Kicking It with That Guy, Pastor Matthew. Thanks for being here today.
Yeah.
Kicking It with Matthew. There it is. It's him right there. And we're going to close up shop. We'll talk to you soon. Love you guys.